Before thinkers like Galileo started the relentless dismantling of religion's quasi-science, the Church had hijacked and thought it could arbitrate on pretty much every aspect of human life. It can't now, it really can't. And they can't admit it nor accept the implications of it, because it would represent the pointy end of the wedge of human common sense, and the cynical religious clerics know full well that they are now on shifting sands. They've seen the bankruptcy of their dogma-based religions exposed in all the empirical fields of human endeavour, and it really hurts. That they have little that's sensible to say about fields like physics, biology or cosmology is now pretty much acknowledged by them all, and so having slipped out of the revealing spotlight of serious scientific inquiry or even dialogue, they exited backstage and set up stall in a somewhat more cosy and dimly lit back room, where they can lick their wounds and decide which fields of human experience remain over which they can claim unique authority. I mean, they have to justify in some way their anachronistic existence, their wages, their privileged and largely unearned social standing, their years of sacrifice and study. One of those glorious fields of human experience that they identified in their cosy, dimly lit corner was, of course, morality. And if you and I were in their shoes, planning a rearguard action, it would be silly to simply claim that we have just one moral view amongst many, including all the non-religious. What they want to claim is total ownership of morality, so that anyone who is not part of their own particular twig on the evolved tree of religion has nothing of value to say on the subject. In fact, by virtue of simply not wearing the identical religious badge they proudly sport themselves, the outsider is immediately defined as evil by definition, incapable of possessing any moral rectitude, no matter how hard he or she tries to be a nice person, and is damned, whatever they do, until they see the light and confess the error of their ways. And don't you think it was slightly immoral of religious clerics not to own up to the cataclysmic ramifications of their failures in the fields of empirical human research, the clear implication of which was a total undermining of any logically valid contention that the Bible or Koran could be the authentic revealed word of God, unless of course the omnipotent and omnipresent one was just testing us when he wrote stuff like the earth and light were created before the stars. This sideways step on the part of the religious clergy was a bit like a sleazy politician, who even when caught with his pants around his ankles and his hands tied to a bordello bedstead, still not only protests his innocence of any moral indiscretion, but has the audacity to change the subject and lambast the investigative journalist in question about how little that journalist's newspaper does in support of the campaign for real ale. Let's define terms. I'm going to use simplified and common sense definitions. Every sane person knows what morality is, whether you're religious or non-religious. I'm not going to insult your intelligence by thinking you need morality to explain to you. You instinctively know the form of morality without having to discuss the contents of it. It's the same as saying that you know what happiness and sadness are without my needing to tell you what I think you should be doing in order to experience one of the other of these two normal human phenomena. Some people believe they're doing wrong if they walk into the street without covering their bodies with burqas. Some people believe they're doing wrong if they bully someone into thinking or doing something against their will. The contents of the moral codes may differ, but the sense of right and wrong, moral and immoral, are pretty constant between all sane members of our glorious species. What I mean by a moral person is simply this then, a person who for some reason or other wants to be a better human being. Better for him or herself, and better for those people he or she comes into contact with in their life. We can all agree that specific moral behaviour has to be learned to a large extent. You're not born with the knowledge that drinking your neighbour's glass of milk is wrong, just as you're not born with the knowledge that fire will burn you. However, the capacity to learn moral behaviour, like learning that fire is hot, is inherent in most normal children. Let's put aside for the moment the arguments from those, by the way, who consider that we're born into sin. The whole concept of morality becomes a strange fish when dangling your rod in this particular pond. I don't think anyone that seriously adheres to the dogma that a little newborn baby is riddled with a poisonous worm of the tree of knowledge would be remotely interested in anything I or you have to say anyway. So let's exclude consideration of their interesting, though feasibly warped, views of morality. So I don't think you will disagree with me when I base my argument for morality on this common sense contention that experiences during one's life can affect a person's morality. After all, if you're a Muslim or a Christian, and I get converted to Islam or Christianity, and stick to the list of prescribed and proscribed behaviours, thoughts and desires, then you cannot possibly disagree with this contention. My morality would change. as far as you're concerned, for the better. And if I discarded your religion and became an apostate, you would again consider that my moral standing had changed, this time for the worse. But where dogmatic religion diverges from our common sense concept of morality is where they would consider that a person cannot be fully moral unless he or she believes the precise dogmas to which they themselves adhere. Many things, events and lifestyles can change a person's morality. A profound relationship, getting cancer, having a near-death experience, reading a book, seeing a film, getting in with a political group at university, joining the army, getting stuck on a desert island, or being born in a large family. Religion is certainly one of the experiences that can give content to the form of morality a person has, but it is merely one of a vast range of experiences. And there's a great irony here. A Muslim will consider that a Christian is less moral than a Muslim. A Christian will consider that a Muslim is less moral than a Christian. But both Christians and Muslims will consider that an atheist is 10 times less moral than either of them. Why is this? Well, indoctrination by self-seeking, cynical clerics. If you're a Muslim, what's 10 times less moral than an atheist? A Jew. Yet are you seriously able to believe that any objective valuation can be given on a randomly selected individual just because of the belief system into which they were raised? There are child molesters, murderers, rapists across all religious and social divides. Religious clerics like to promote the fallacy that it's only through a set of rigorously reinforced scriptural directives that a person can be truly moral. Those who don't adhere to dogmatic religions are thus considered to be subhuman and quite incapable of finding any reason not to simply go out and rape everyone and steal everything in sight. And why do clerics promulgate this nonsense? Again, it should be obvious to you. If it's seen as possible to live a life without dogma, and without the need for the guidance of clerical leaders to interpret and police the application of the dogma, then who's going to be out of a job? Now, none of the moral tenets of religion are totally absent from the rest of non-religious life, and none of the moral tenets of non-religion are totally absent from religion. The golden rule of do to others what you'd have them do to you, or an eye for an eye, and so forth. They move across borders. What I and you might consider objecting to with some vigour is anyone who claims to be the sole source and arbiter of morality. That's why I urge you to think carefully about whether you can ever be taken seriously if you side with the religious bigots who claim that a non-religious person cannot have a valid moral test. It may be simply ignorance on your part, and that's excusable, but I tell you it's downright cynical self-interested deception on the part of the religious clerics. Had they not allowed these religious hijackers of morality to implant the sordid untruth into their minds, the average member of the religious flock would never seriously consider it an a priori given truth that their non-religious neighbours are incapable of possessing their own concept of right and wrong separate from religious dogma. A test of this, by the way, would be the following. Form a panel comprised of a cross-section of people from different socio-religious backgrounds. Give them detailed information on the day-to-day actions, thoughts and emotions of, let's say, 100 unidentified people. What do you think the chances are that the panel would be able to form pretty reasonable judgments of whether or not they thought the individuals were acting morally or not? Pretty high, I would have thought. People who spend all their time stepping on other people to get what they want will be defined as immoral and selfish. Some who are quite the reverse in their selfless devotion to others will be thought of as highly moral. If you have no problem with the thought that such a panel could be formed, and such results would reasonably be expected, then you have answered for yourself whether or not religion owns morality. Morality is a consensus of opinion. It varies from society to society and from time to time, but that's just the contents. The form, i.e. the ability to judge for yourself whether something is good or bad, right or wrong, does not vary a great deal, and it certainly does not vary across any imaginary moral boundaries between religious and non-religious people. Your belief in a spiritual realm or a personally defined Jesus or guardian spirit or whatever you want to believe is not under threat from accepting that dogmatic religion, under the auspices of cynical and self-preserving clergy, has hijacked morality. And by so hijacking it, religion has itself become morally bankrupt, bereft of common sense credibility, stuck in biblical or Quranic time, pickled in its own sweat and unrepentant in its callous divisiveness. Form and content. While the contents of moral codes certainly vary, the form of human morality is pretty constant. And my questions to you are these. Do you really believe that you would lose all moral form, i.e. the ability to judge right and wrong, if religion disappeared overnight? And if you'd been born in a totally different family, society, nation and time, are you certain the contents of your moral codes would be what they are now?